How did you survive being buried alive? I woke up to the sound of my own breathing, loud and panicked in absolute darkness. My hands were tied in front of me, and when I tried to sit up, my forehead hit wood, solid wood, inches from my face. I reached up and felt along the surface above me, my fingers tracing smooth planks that extended in every direction. The reality hit me like ice water. I was in a coffin, underground. I could feel the weight of earth pressing down through the wood, could smell the mineral scent of fresh dirt mixed with something chemical I couldn't identify. My heart started hammering so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I screamed, pounding on the lid with both fists until my hands ached. The wood didn't budge. The sound died in the enclosed space, muffled by earth and darkness. Nobody could hear me. Nobody was coming. I was buried alive, and I was going to die here unless I could think my way out. That's when I felt my phone still in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands, and the screen's glow nearly blinded me after the complete darkness. 1 bar of signal. Battery at 68%. Before I could process what that meant, the phone buzzed, and a video call connected automatically. The screen split into 2 views. One showed my own face, pale and dirt-streaked in the phone's harsh light. The other showed an external camera angle of a wooden coffin being lowered into a desert hole by 2 men in masks. My coffin. I was watching my own burial from the outside. Text appeared across the bottom of the screen in English. Good evening, Prosecutor Whitmore. Welcome to your final trial. You spent 6 months building a case against Hector Vega. You used every legal trick to put our leader away for life. Now we use different tricks. The coffin has oxygen for 48 hours. Your phone battery will last maybe 36 hours. This live stream is broadcasting to 200 members of Sinaloa Norte who paid to watch. If you escape, you live. If you don't, you become a lesson to other prosecutors. The choice is yours. I stared at the screen, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. At the bottom, a chat window scrolled with comments in Spanish and English. Cartel members were watching in real time, commenting on my fear, making bets on how long I'd survive. 12 hours, Max, someone wrote. He'll panic and waste oxygen, wrote another. I give him 6 hours before he starts crying for his mother. They were treating this like entertainment, like I was a character in a movie instead of a human being dying in the dark. My prosecutor brain kicked in despite the terror trying to shut down my thoughts. This was evidence. This live stream was being recorded somewhere. These comments could be traced. The cartel had made a mistake by documenting this, by turning my murder into a spectacle. If I survived, every person watching this stream was guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. But first, I had to survive, and I had no idea how to escape a coffin buried 6 feet underground. I forced myself to slow my breathing, counting to 4 on each inhale and exhale. Panic was using up oxygen I couldn't afford to waste. I needed to think like the prosecutor who'd just won the biggest case of his career instead of the terrified man buried alive. I started examining my surroundings with the phone's light. The coffin was wooden but well built, with reinforced corners and what looked like sealed seams. This wasn't some improvised grave. They'd planned this carefully. Then I noticed something strange. There was a small tube running from the corner of the coffin up through the lid. I followed it with my fingers and realized it was PVC pipe, maybe half an inch in diameter, leading up through the wood. A ventilation tube. That's how they were giving me 48 hours of air instead of the 30 minutes a normal coffin would provide. The cartel wanted me to last long enough to make the show worth watching. They'd engineered my death to be slow and terrifying instead of quick. The phone buzzed again, and new text appeared. We see you found the air tube, prosecutor. Smart man. Here are the rules since you like rules so much. Rule 1. The live stream stays on. Everyone watches. Rule 2. If you damage the phone, the air tube closes automatically. Rule 3. You can try to escape, but the coffin is buried under 6 feet of packed desert soil. Rule 4. If you somehow get out, there are men with rifles waiting at the surface. This is your trial now. Show us how smart you really are. I read the rules 3 times, looking for loopholes the way I'd been trained. Rule 4 was the key. If you somehow get out, there are men with rifles waiting. That meant they expected escape might be possible. They'd engineered this to be difficult, but not impossible. A true death sentence wouldn't need guards at the surface. This was a game, and they wanted me to play, which meant there had to be a way to win, even if the odds were designed to be against me. I started examining every inch of the coffin with my phone's light, running my hands along the wood, looking for weak points or hidden mechanisms. The cartel members in the chat were commenting on my movements. He's looking for an exit, someone wrote in Spanish. There isn't one, idiota. Another wrote, even if he breaks through the wood, he'll suffocate digging through 6 feet of dirt. Their confidence told me something important. They didn't think I could escape, which meant they might have gotten careless. That's when I noticed my hands. The zip ties were tight but not professional grade. These were the kind you could buy at any hardware store, not the reinforced tactical restraints police used. I twisted my wrists and felt a little give in the plastic. If I could find something sharp in the coffin, I might be able to cut through them. I searched the seams with my fingers and found a rough edge where 2 boards joined. Not sharp enough to cut flesh, but maybe sharp enough to wear down plastic with enough friction. I spent the next 20 minutes sawing my zip ties against the wood seam, ignoring the pain as the plastic cut into my wrists. The chat filled with comments about what I was doing. Some were annoyed that I wasn't panicking more. Others were impressed I was trying anything at all. One comment stood out. Vega's lawyer said this one was smart. Maybe he actually makes it interesting. The mention of Vega's lawyer made my chest tight with a different kind of fear. How many people had been involved in planning this? The zip ties finally snapped and my hands were free. I rubbed my wrists where the plastic had cut deep grooves, then went back to examining the coffin. With both hands free, I could apply more pressure to different sections. I pushed against each wall, testing for weak points. The sides were solid. The bottom was reinforced. But when I pushed against the area near the ventilation tube, I felt something shift slightly. The wood around the tube wasn't as secure as the rest of the structure. The phone battery had dropped to 54%. I'd been underground for maybe 3 hours based on the timestamp on the live stream. My mouth was dry and I was starting to feel the effects of limited oxygen. Slight headache, difficulty focusing. I needed water, but there was none. I needed fresh air, but there was only the thin stream coming through the ventilation tube. I needed to move faster, or I'd be too weak to escape even if I found a way out. I wrapped my shirt around my hand and started hitting the wood around the ventilation tube, trying to widen the weak point I'd found. Each impact made the phone camera shake, and the chat exploded with excitement. He's trying to break through. This is getting good. Someone bet me $500 he dies in the next hour. Don't let me down, prosecutor. I ignored their words and kept hitting, feeling the wood start to splinter under repeated impacts. Then the phone rang, an actual call coming through bypassing the livestream app. I answered without thinking, and a voice I didn't recognize said, "Prosecutor Whitmore, this is Mateo Reyes. You probably don't remember me, but you helped get my charges reduced 3 years ago when I cooperated as a witness. I'm watching this live stream, and I need you to know that your GPS is still transmitting. I'm screenshot every location ping. I've already called the FBI. They're triangulating your position now. You need to stay alive for maybe 6 more hours." The call disconnected before I could respond. 6 hours. The FBI was coming. But 6 hours was a long time when you were running out of oxygen in a coffin. The cartel members in the chat had seen the call notification and were losing their minds with speculation about who called and what they said. Someone wrote, "If he got help, we need to move him." Another replied, "Too late. The show must go on. Boss's orders." Their argument told me something crucial. Not everyone watching was on the same page about how this should end. I went back to breaking through the wood around the ventilation tube, working faster now that I knew help was coming. The splinters were getting bigger, and I could feel cool air coming through the gaps. But with each piece of wood I broke away, I noticed the airflow from the ventilation tube was decreasing. They'd meant what they said about the automatic cutoff. The tube was connected to a pressure sensor that detected damage to the coffin. The more I broke, the less air I got. I had to make a choice. Stop breaking the wood and conserve oxygen but stay trapped, or keep breaking through and risk suffocating before I could dig out. The prosecutor in me wanted to wait for the FBI, play it safe, trust the system. But the part of me that could feel the oxygen getting thinner with each breath knew I couldn't last 6 more hours. I kept hitting the wood, widening the hole, accepting that I might pass out before I reached the surface. The wood finally gave way enough that I could fit my arm through the gap. I pushed through splintered boards and felt dirt on the other side. Packed earth, hard and dry. I started digging with my hands, pulling soil into the coffin to make room for more digging. The chat was going crazy. Half the viewers were cheering me on. The other half were angry that I might actually escape. Their split reactions confirmed what Mateo had implied. This wasn't a unified cartel operation. Different factions were watching with different agendas. My phone battery hit 31%, and the air in the coffin was getting noticeably thinner. I was lightheaded, and my hands were bleeding from digging through dirt and splinters. I'd managed to create a tunnel maybe 2 feet up through the soil, but I had at least 4 more feet to go before I reached the surface. The math wasn't working in my favor. I was using oxygen faster than I was making progress. I needed to try something different. I grabbed the phone and typed into the live stream chat, "To whoever arranged this burial, I know you're watching. I also know this wasn't Hector Vega's operation. He's locked up in federal supermax with no contact privileges. Someone else set this up and blamed it on Sinaloa Norte. If I die here, the FBI investigation will prove Vega was framed for my murder. But if you let me out now, I can testify that this was a rival cartel trying to start a war." The chat went silent for almost 30 seconds. Then messages started flooding in, but they were different now. Arguments between cartel members about who had authorized the burial. Accusations about rival cartels. Someone wrote in Spanish, "The Gulf Cartel has been trying to frame us for months." Another replied, "Shut up, you'll expose the whole plan." I'd thrown a grenade into their chat, and now they were turning on each other. A video call notification popped up on my phone. Private call, not part of the live stream. I answered, and a man's face appeared on screen. Older, maybe 60, with gray hair and scars on his neck. He spoke in accented English. "Prosecutor Whitmore, my name is Diego Vega. I am Hector's uncle. What you just said in the chat. Can you prove it?" I forced my voice to stay steady, despite the lack of oxygen making my head spin. Your nephew has been in federal custody for 6 months with no outside communication. He couldn't have ordered this hit. But the Gulf Cartel has been trying to expand into your territory. They grab me, they broadcast it on a Sinaloa Norte stream, and when I die, the FBI comes after your organization with everything they have. It's a setup. Diego's face was hard to read. If what you say is true, then you are a problem for the Gulf Cartel, not for us. And an enemy of our enemy might be useful alive. He looked at something off-screen, then back at me. There are Gulf Cartel spotters watching the burial site. They are the ones with rifles waiting for you to surface. My people are 30 minutes away. Can you last 30 minutes? I looked at my phone battery. 22%. I looked at the thin tunnel I'd dug that still had 4 feet to go. I felt my lungs burning with each shallow breath. I can try. The video call ended, and I was back to the live stream. The chat had transformed into a war zone of accusations between Sinaloa Norte members and suspected Gulf Cartel infiltrators. Someone was posting GPS coordinates of known Gulf Cartel safe houses. Others were sharing photos of suspected infiltrators. I'd turned my execution into a catalyst for cartel civil war, and now my only hope of survival depended on one cartel saving me to spite another. I went back to digging, but my movements were getting slower. My hands didn't want to cooperate anymore. The air was so thin that each breath felt like breathing through a straw. I managed another foot of tunnel before my vision started going dark at the edges. Phone battery at 18%. I didn't know how much oxygen I had left, but my body was telling me it wasn't much. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, too fast, too hard, working overtime to extract oxygen from air that barely had any left. That's when I heard something new. A sound coming through the dirt above me, shouting in Spanish. Gunfire. The sounds were muffled by 4 feet of earth but unmistakable. A firefight was happening at the surface directly above my grave. Diego's people had arrived early, or maybe the FBI had gotten here faster than Mateo thought. Either way, I was trapped underground while people were killing each other over whether I lived or died. The phone died. Battery hit 0 and the screen went black. I was back in complete darkness, buried alive, with no way to communicate and no way to know who was winning the fight above. The ventilation tube had mostly closed off from the damage I'd done to the coffin. I could feel myself starting to lose consciousness. My last thought before passing out was that I'd gotten so close. 3 more feet of digging and I'd have reached the surface. 3 more feet and I'd have lived. I woke up to hands grabbing me and pulling me upward through dirt. Someone was digging down to me, widening my tunnel, shouting in Spanish. I couldn't move to help them. My body wouldn't respond to what my brain was trying to tell it to do. They pulled me out through the tunnel like extracting a corpse from a grave. And then I was on the surface, choking on fresh air that felt too rich after hours of oxygen deprivation. Someone put an oxygen mask over my face, and I sucked in lungfuls of clean air while my vision slowly cleared. I was lying on desert sand surrounded by men with rifles. Some wore tactical gear that said FBI in yellow letters. Others wore street clothes and had cartel tattoos visible on their arms. The two groups weren't shooting at each other anymore. They were standing in an awkward cluster around the hole they'd pulled me from, like opposing football teams after a game. Bodies lay scattered around the area. The Gulf Cartel spotters who'd been waiting to kill me if I escaped. An FBI agent knelt beside me and pulled the oxygen mask aside long enough to say, "Prosecutor Whitmore, I'm Special Agent Ramos. We've been tracking your GPS signal for the past 4 hours. When we arrived, we found Sinaloa Norte soldiers already engaging with Gulf Cartel spotters. The enemy of our enemy situation just got very complicated." He looked over at the cartel members standing nearby. "Those men saved your life. They also committed multiple homicides in the process. I have about 30 seconds before I have to arrest them. If you have something to say it now." I sat up, still struggling to breathe normally, and looked at Diego Vega standing with his men. They stopped an execution being live-streamed by a rival cartel. They prevented my murder. That makes them witnesses, not suspects. Ramos's expression made it clear he knew I was bending the law into a pretzel, but he also knew I was right in a technical sense. "We'll need their statements, all of them, and cooperation on identifying the Gulf Cartel members who organized this." Diego nodded once. "My nephew rots in prison for crimes he committed, but we do not take blame for crimes committed by others. We will cooperate fully." The next 6 hours were a blur of federal agents, EMTs, and investigators swarming the burial site. They extracted the coffin completely and photographed everything. The live stream had been traced to a server farm in Tijuana, operated by the Gulf Cartel. They'd been running similar operations for months, live streaming violence against rivals and enemies to build their reputation while framing Sinaloa Norte for the attacks. My burial was supposed to be the finale, the execution that would bring federal heat down on their competitors. An FBI forensic team recovered my phone and extracted the full live stream data. Every cartel member who'd watched and commented was now on a federal list. Every GPS coordinate that had been shared in the chat during the cartel civil war gave investigators locations for raids. My 6 hours buried alive had produced more intelligence on cartel operations than 6 months of traditional investigation. The Gulf Cartel had tried to kill me, and instead had given the FBI everything needed to dismantle their organization. But the part that made me physically sick was what Agent Ramos told me 3 days later when I was being released from the hospital. We found the inside source who gave the Gulf Cartel your schedule. Court clerk named Valerie Thornton. She'd been feeding them information on prosecutors for 2 years. 3 other prosecutors had, quote, accidents that we're now reinvestigating as possible homicides. She was paid $50,000 for your location and schedule that day. I remembered Valerie, quiet woman in her 50s who worked in the court records department. She'd smiled at me the day I won the Vega case. She'd said congratulations. And she'd known exactly when I'd be leaving the courthouse, exactly where I'd parked, exactly when I'd be alone in that parking garage. She'd sold me to the Gulf Cartel like I was a product instead of a person. Agent Ramos added, she's in custody now, looking at federal conspiracy to commit murder charges. If the other prosecutor deaths are connected, she's facing multiple life sentences. I visited Hector Vega in federal prison 2 weeks after being dug out of that desert grave. He sat across from me in the visiting room wearing prison orange and chains. I'd put him there. He'd run a criminal empire that destroyed countless lives, but he'd also been set up to take the blame for my murder, and I needed to hear what he knew. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. My uncle told me what happened. The Gulf Cartel tried to kill you and blame my organization. They wanted to eliminate you and start a war that would destroy what remains of my family's operation. I leaned forward. Did you know about the clerk? About Valerie Thornton feeding information to the Gulf Cartel? Vega's expression didn't change. I knew there was a source inside the courthouse. I tried to warn you through my lawyer, but federal rules prohibited me from contacting prosecutors. So, I did the next best thing. I made sure my uncle was watching for threats against you. When the live stream went up on that Sinaloa Norte channel, he knew immediately it was fake. No one in my organization would be stupid enough to broadcast a federal prosecutor's murder. That was Gulf Cartel arrogance. The irony wasn't lost on me. The cartel boss I'd prosecuted had tried to save my life, while a court employee I trusted had tried to end it. Vega continued, you are alive because I chose to protect you. Remember that when you investigate the Gulf Cartel's operations. Remember who helped you and who tried to bury you alive. I left that prison understanding that justice wasn't as simple as guilty and innocent. Sometimes the monsters tried to save you while the normal people sold you out for $50,000. The federal investigation into the Gulf Cartel took 8 months and resulted in 43 arrests across 3 states. The live stream data I'd helped generate led to seizures of millions in drug money and weapons. The server farm in Tijuana was raided, and dozens of similar live streams were discovered. Other victims, other people buried, tortured, or executed on camera for cartel entertainment. My survival had helped expose an entire network of violence that had been operating invisibly for years, but I never prosecuted another cartel case. I couldn't. Every time I walked into a parking garage, I had a panic attack. Every time my phone lost signal, I felt like I was suffocating. I took a position teaching law at a university where the most dangerous thing I faced was hostile questions from argumentative students. I testified at Valerie Thornton's trial and watched her get sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms for her role in 4 prosecutor deaths, including the 3 accidents that turned out to be murders. 6 months after being buried alive, I got a letter forwarded through my lawyer from Diego Vega. Inside was a simple message written in careful English. You kept your word about our cooperation. I keep mine. No one in my organization will target you or your family. You are protected. This is not a favor. This is payment of a debt. You survived because you were smart enough to see the truth. That deserves respect. The letter wasn't signed, but included a phone number I was supposed to call if I ever needed help. I threw it away. Then I dug it out of the trash and kept it, hating myself for even considering there might come a day when I'd need a cartel boss's protection. A year after everything happened, Mateo Reyes called me, the former witness who'd seen my live stream and called the FBI. He wanted to meet for coffee and thank me properly. We sat in a cafe downtown, and he explained that seeing the cartel bury a prosecutor alive had convinced him to testify in 2 more cases, despite death threats. You didn't quit even when you were in a coffin with no air, he said. If you could fight that, I can fight threats from people who want me silent. You showed me what courage looks like. I didn't feel courageous. I felt like someone who'd gotten lucky and survived something that should have killed him. But if my survival gave other witnesses the strength to testify, maybe being buried alive had purpose beyond just my own survival. I still have nightmares about the coffin. I wake up feeling like I can't breathe, like there's wood pressing down on my face and dirt filling my lungs. My therapist says the trauma will fade with time, but some nights I'm not sure I want it to fade. Those 6 hours underground taught me things about justice and corruption that years in courtrooms never did. I learned that the system I trusted was compromised. I learned that enemies could become allies and allies could be enemies. I learned that $50,000 was enough to make someone sell a prosecutor's life. Those lessons cost me 6 hours buried alive, but they made me understand the real world in ways my law degree never could. 2 years after my burial, the Gulf Cartel was functionally destroyed as an organization. The intelligence from that live stream, combined with Diego Vega's cooperation, had given the FBI everything needed to dismantle their operation completely. Sinaloa Norte was weaker too, with Hector Vega still in prison and his uncle running a diminished organization. The balance of power in the drug trade had shifted, but violence hadn't decreased. New cartels were already filling the vacuum, fighting over territory, recruiting new soldiers. My survival had changed individual outcomes, but not the underlying system that created this violence in the first place. Sometimes I think about those 200 cartel members who watched me buried alive that night. Some of them helped save me by arguing in the chat. Others bet on my death. All of them watched a human being suffocate for entertainment. The FBI arrested dozens based on their participation in the live stream chat, but most were never found. They're still out there, probably watching new live streams of new victims, treating human suffering as content to be consumed. That thought keeps me awake some nights more than the memory of the coffin itself. I survived being buried alive by staying calm when I should have panicked, by finding loopholes when I should have given up, and by causing enough chaos to make enemies fight each other instead of me. But mostly, I survived because Mateo Reyes cared enough to call the FBI, because Diego Vega valued his nephew's reputation more than he valued my death, and because I got lucky. That's what survival usually comes down to. Not noble virtue or superior skill, but luck and timing, and the unpredictable choices other people make that determine whether you live or die. I got lucky. 3 other prosecutors didn't. I think about them every time I teach a class about prosecutorial ethics. I think about how they're dead and I'm alive, and how that came down to nothing more than the random chance of who Valerie Thornton decided to sell out on which day. Justice pretends to be orderly and fair, but survival is chaos.